Good afternoon, Nova Nation. Happy Monday, and welcome here inside of the WXVU studio for another edition, the third episode of the semester of Villanova Sports Talk. David Szczepanski alongside Stephen Cain. The great news is that Villanova is getting ready to begin their CAA schedule this weekend. It's beautiful outside. The bad news is that Steve and I are both not feeling well. We're pushing through for Nova Nation. We're going to get through this, Steve. Hopefully everybody can stand to listen to my very scratchy voice for the next hour. But Steve, great to be with you here on a Monday.
Yeah, of course. Great to be with you as always, David. Excited to talk Villanova football, get ready for the Monmouth game. It'll be a huge game Saturday. We'll get to that after recapping our experience at Happy Valley, the Villanova football team's experience in Happy Valley, and too, I mean, I think back to the Michael Jordan flu game, right? I think if we get through this, I think it'll be one of the great performances. It'll be up there with something like that. Doing the show through this kind of allergy stuff that we're both going through.
Yeah, allergy season is terrible right now, and I feel like this is not just an us issue. I feel like it's mainly everybody that I've talked to around campus, off campus. So hope everybody is doing okay during this time. We'll get to the poll question in just a moment, but Steve, I thought you really summed it up well there to begin the show. I'm going to recap our Happy Valley experiences. Now, luckily for you, you did not have the allergies going on up there. I did. I may have had some sort of a sickness at some point in time as well, but pushed through Happy Valley, and it was so great to be up there. I mean, I know we said it on the broadcast, but it really, to me, as someone that has been to Cooperstown before, it really felt like, and I know I've said this a million times, but truthfully, it really felt like Cooperstown for Penn State football is what Happy Valley is. And it was so cool to be up there. We went to the Creamery. I feel like we did all the touristy things, which is a good thing, right? We went to the Creamery, which was really good. I had the Death by Chocolate. You had the strawberry. And then we also went to the Waffle Shop, which is like the go-to diner spot basically up there. I also said this on the broadcast. None of us got waffles, which was kind of funny and interesting. But we all had a really good time. It was nice to be up there and just to experience it. And I said it to Steve too off air, but I said I'd love to go back, especially when you're kind of going as a fan, just to kind of really experience from that perspective as well. But it was truly a dream come true for me, and I'm sure Steve and Nathan as well. I know Nathan growing up just a few minutes away, it was definitely a dream for him. Just a dream come true to be up there to broadcast at such a historic stadium like Beaver Stadium, and really a great time. Despite the losing my voice in the second half, it was truly a moment that I'll remember for the rest of my life.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And not only fun for us, and again, we'll get to the actual result of the game, but for Villanova football as well. Even though the game did not go the way that they wanted, it was by far the largest crowd that they played in front of. The only attendance record for them that comes close is when Villanova played Penn State in 2021. That was like a little over 100,000 people, but the number came out. It was over 109,000 people or something like that in Beaver Stadium watching Villanova and Penn State play. So that definitely is something that the players themselves, the coaches, again, and we'll get to the game, even though the result was definitely not fun for them, they definitely struggled on both sides of the ball, and it's to be expected against a top 2 team in the FBS. It was still something I'm sure that the players really enjoyed, just to be a part of that experience.
And obviously we don't know, how much exactly the football team gets paid to play in a game like this. But the estimates are somewhere around $1 million, whether that's north of $1 million, south of $1 million, somewhere around there. And, it's a great experience for the players. It's a great experience for the coaching staff. But it's also an opportunity for the program to bring in some money, which can help them at obviously later point in times, bringing in transfers, which Villanova's done an excellent job with, for being an FCS program and not losing players. Really, the only player that they really lost this year was Jalen Sanchez, heading in from last season to this year, who transferred to the FBS. So, Villanova using that money, and it's great for the program to have, and really such a great experience for the players. Like we said, a dream, I'm sure, for them to play at a stadium like Beaver Stadium against the second best team in the country, and also, of course, for us to be up there broadcasting it. And I hope, wherever you listened or watched, I know that the reception up there at Beaver Stadium is not good, especially with 106,000 people crammed into one spot. And in addition to that, State College kind of being put right in the middle of Pennsylvania. There's really not a whole lot around there in terms of like cities or anything like that. So definitely such a cool experience to be up there. And if you had the chance to, be up there, I'm sure you had a good time. And if you didn't, definitely put it on your bucket list. I'm happy that Steve and I were able to cross it off of ours. Now I want to get to the poll questions before we talk about the game itself. We have 3 of them for you on my Twitter at WXVU David S. First poll question: which Villanova football player impressed you the most against Penn State? David Abbott, Brandon Minkowski, Newton Essiem, or Amari Bursey? Second question for the show today: Did you go to Beaver Stadium for Villanova versus Penn State? Pretty simple here, yes or no. And then poll question number 3: Who will win Saturday's CAA contest, Villanova or Monmouth? Steve, want to get to the game, and of course we'll recap our thoughts on the poll questions at the very end of today's program if we're able to make it through the next 55 minutes, which is going to be a push through. 52-6 final score, Penn State over Villanova. On Saturday, the Wildcats were so close to getting on the board in the second quarter. A field goal, which I believe was a 37-yard attempt from Barnum at first, was good. There was a holding penalty against Temi Tutu, made it almost a 50-yard attempt, and Villanova was not able to make it. Had the distance, but a little to the left was the kick from Barnum. So Villanova was finally, though, able to get on the board at the buzzer with 0 seconds left. A 8-yard touchdown pass from Tanner Maddox to Brandon Binkowski to get the Cats on the board. Still 52-6 loss, but I know for a lot of people out there, especially those that look at sports for the betting side of things, very happy that Villanova was able to cover, and they did so with that fourth quarter touchdown in the last second to Brandon Binkowski. I think the biggest takeaway, even though you look at the score, was just the way the Villanova's defense played, especially in the first half. I mean, they allowed 21 points to, many could argue, the team that is one of the favorites, maybe the favorite, to win the national championship this year. And even though they gave up 21 points, I think the defense honestly played even better than that. I mean, you have to remember the Wildcats defense was out there on the field for so much time in the first half. The stats broadcast is not correct with the time because I still checked it and I don't think that they're completely accurate. But Villanova, I think they only had the ball for like 5 minutes in the first half. So Villanova's defense was out there for so long, and with that considered, I thought they played really well. Newton Essiem, it was great to have him back. You could really tell, the difference that at that second cornerback spot was, because not only was Essiem, a big factor and a big positive factor in this game, but a lot of guys like Anthony Hawkins who were pretty fresh when he came into the game. I thought he played really well. Amari Bursey to get the interception. So I really like the way that Coach Pennypacker was able to kind of organize the defense and go from there. But I thought the defense in the first half was really, really strong. And Drew Aller, okay, maybe once again he didn't have his best game, his best performance. I think that was pretty obvious. But Villanova's defense did an excellent job to really stop the passing attack. Now Nicholas Singleton, Katron Allen had great games, but thought all in all, considering how good Penn State is, I was very impressed with the defense, especially the secondary, considering how many questions there were after that disappointing performance against Colgate, just with the missed tackles.
And just think how much this boosts this young secondary's confidence. We talked about that a lot during the broadcast. Amari Bursey getting an interception. He's one of those younger guys coming in, getting some starting time for the first 2 games this season. Again, Zamir Dawood had some moments. Garrett Rogan, Newton Essiem, and Anthony Hawkins, again, looked really solid. 2 pass breakups. Jamie Tyson as well had some nice pass breakups.
That's a good point. First half, he made probably the biggest play defensive of the first half to stop a potential touchdown for the Nittany Lions.
Yeah, Demiel Bostic also had a nice pass breakup. Caleb Moody. Again, obviously we're cherry picking a little bit, but you have to lower your expectations when evaluating this game. Penn State was expected to dominate on both sides of the ball, and that is what happened. But something that we didn't expect was this Villanova secondary at least breaking up some passes off of some pretty solid wide receivers on the Penn State side of the ball. We talked about it in the pregame show, Trevor Pena, Kyron Hudson, Devontae Ross. They have a really good receiving core, even though I'm sure the chatter on the Penn State side is that the passing attack hasn't been as good as people thought it would be heading into the season. It's just encouraging that the secondary was able to make just a couple nice plays. You had the one interception by Bursey, and then the one play by Anthony Hawkins where he came down with the ball but his feet was out of bounds, so he ended up not intercepting that, but that was very close. And there were a couple times he got tested deep in the end zone and he held really strong. He's really developing nicely. In particular, I know I've raved about him a lot on this show and the broadcast the past few weeks, but he's looked really solid at that safety spot. And again, besides the first half against Colgate, he's been very, very solid. So definitely from that perspective, I really like things. And 2, I think the tackling was a little bit better, and I like how Villanova,
a lot better.
Yeah, and I like the strategy where rather than try to meet those Penn State guys who again are just so much bigger and faster, most of the time you're going to lose the battle when you have a Villanova guy trying to tackle a Penn State guy in the open field upright, because Trevor Pena, Kyron Hudson, these guys are freaks of nature. They'll just stiff arm you out of the way or just run right through you. But the one thing you can do is go for the lower body and try to trip them up and have them fall over. And Villanova did that a couple times. So just the resiliency there, not giving up, having a strategy to stop a borderline impossible attack to be stopped in Penn State. I thought it was pretty admirable on the defensive side of things.
In the second half, things did go south for Villanova's defense. But with that being said, I mean, they were very, very tired. Don't necessarily want to use that as a total excuse, but I mean, it is the second best team in the country. So as Steve said, you have to kind of evaluate things on a much different, balance beam, if you will, rather than if it was a CAA game that we were talking about, of course. I want to dive more into Villanova's offense. This offensive attack really didn't have any response for Penn State's defense in the first half of this game, which was, an issue for the Wildcats heading into the locker room at halftime. And really kind of what took the Wildcats out of any sort of rhythm in the first half was when Pat McQuaid was injured, went into the medical tent. I believe he missed 2 drives, Steve, if I'm correct, 2 or 3 at the end of the day. It was some sort of a lower body, I believe an ankle injury. He ended up going 7 for 15, did play some of the second half, especially in the third quarter, threw for just 27 yards, had no touchdowns, did have an interception. And then Tanner Maddox came into the game when McQuaid was injured, which is a difficult spot for the backup, who just I guess I will say, lost the battle for the job in the offseason to be put into that spot with 106,000 people. Maddox was 6 for 12, had 69 yards, a touchdown, and an interception. All in all, I thought Maddox looked good in the second half. I thought he made some adjustments, and that's one of the good things about this Villanova program and team is that they learn from what happened in the first half and make noticeable differences and strategy changes heading out of the locker room and into the second half, into the final 30 minutes. I thought that was clear with Maddox here, especially in the fourth quarter. Great catch, of course, by Brandon Binkowski. I think the main concern, though, for a lot of people is if McQuaid is out for some time. Now, he did come back in the second half. He didn't finish the game, which is probably due to the margin and the score of the game.
Yeah.
But I didn't think he looked 100% healthy even when he came back into the game personally. We didn't have any update from Coach Ferrante at that post-game press conference about McQuaid, but the concern is that if McQuaid can't play this week, can you trust Maddox to perform well, especially against a team like Monmouth that although they don't have a good defense, you're going to have to put up a lot of offensive stats to get the job done, especially against a team that Villanova has not played well against in program history. So that's a concern there. I didn't think McQuaid was 100%. Steve, what did you make of the quarterbacks? Obviously a tough task against this Penn State defense, but I didn't think either of them played particularly well. And of course, given the circumstances, I guess that was expected.
It was difficult for both quarterbacks, to put it simply. This Penn State front four was so deep, and the Villanova offensive line was just purely technically and physically just outmatched, whether it was McQuaid or Maddox in the gun, and they were getting ready to throw the ball was snapped by the center, Jake Picard. It would go into McQuaid or Maddox's hands, and immediately just the Penn State defense would just immediately converge on the quarterback, and that led to Chris Bowden, the offensive coordinator, having to draw up some creative play calls, getting the ball out quickly out of your hands inside of 3 seconds, 2 seconds, because that's really all you could ask for against how great this Penn State front was. But in terms of the performance, I'll start with Tanner Maddox. I think the Pat McQuaid thing is interesting, and there's still some uncertainty with the injury stuff. And I'll just quickly say with McQuaid, I think it is a true bummer because against that Colgate defense in the season opener, it looked like, we talked about it last week on Villanova Sports Talk, he may have unlocked this new dimension of his game, running that touchdown in from 4th and 1. From 30 yards out and scrambling and looking a bit mobile and still being a pocket passer. He would prefer to do most of the damage with his arm, but could also do some of the damage with his legs. And now he has something with his lower body, one of his feet possibly, and that could hamper that a little bit. And all of a sudden now he's back to being a one-dimensional quarterback. Still very good with his arm, but it just stinks that dimension that we thought he had unlocked after the first game, maybe an overreaction, but still, now it's going to be difficult for him to use his legs for the foreseeable future, presumably. And then with Tanner Maddox, I do have to respect the grit, the hustle, because he threw one of the worst balls all day, that pick six to make it 52-0. It was in the fourth quarter, and Penn State just continued to run up the score. But the Villanova, they get the football back. Tanner Maddox is still in there, and he leads this really nice, super long drive, 16 plays, 75 yards, and caps it off with getting some points out of it. Again, some points is always good to take away from that experience at Happy Valley. And Braden Binkowski was somebody that was maybe kind of on our radar, but not totally. The redshirt freshman had one of the great highlight catches of not just the game, but all weekend in college football. A one-handed Odell Beckham-like catch in the back of the end zone. Maddox on 4th and goal scrambled to his right, threw it back across his body over the arms of 2 outstretched defenders. That's what you can get from Tanner Maddox, and I admire that he didn't get down on himself after that interception and throwing that pick 6. He just said, okay, I'm going to go back to work. And it wasn't just Binkowski, it was also Braden Reed getting in on the action, and we talked about at the end of the broadcast that Villanova, they have Luke Colella, they have Lucas Kopecki pretty locked up in that wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2 spot. Wide receiver 3 is pretty open, so it'll be interesting to see if Reed or Binkowski kind of challenge for that role.
Yeah, I thought Binkowski was really good. He had 2 catches, 19 yards, and that catch actually ended up being top 10 number 1 on SportsCenter. And then also Braden Reed, as you said, Steve, 2 catches for 41 yards, had a 33-yard catch in there as well, also had 4 targets. And those are 2 of the younger guys that really stepped up. And as you said, Steve, that wide receiver number 3 spot is open in a sense, and it would be nice for one of those guys to kind of take that spot. Binkowski, his first career touchdown in college. It's such a huge moment for him. I know that he was really excited about it. Let's listen to the call as we heard it on WXVU with that buzzer beater, really, at the end of the game for Villanova to get on the board. Maybe you can't hear anything there, but I promise I was playing the call. I don't think, we'll see if we can get that figured out eventually. But regardless, Binkowski with an excellent catch there in the back of the end zone. Want to talk about the rushing attack as well, Steve, before we transition, just to talk a little bit about the polls, and then, of course, talk about Villanova versus Monmouth in the second half of today's show. I thought David Abbott had one of the best games of any Villanova player on Saturday. I don't think that that's a hot take by any means, but he had 10 carries for 53 yards, 27-yard run. He averaged more than 5 yards per carry, and he just looked like David Abbott from last year, his freshman year, which was nice because in the game against Colgate, the rushing attack as a whole, I think, underperformed. So it was nice to see him get going again. Jabril Mace also had a really good game as well. 3 carries, 20 yards. Saw him being used, of course, as a punt returner, also being used in space as well. He ended up having 2 catches for 3 yards, but he also had 3 targets in that game at 5 yards after the catch. So Mace, I thought, had a good game. Isaiah Ragland struggled again, just 10 carries for 9 yards, but I think a lot of it, again, had to do with kind of some of the situations he was being put into. Abbott was more the pure runner. You would see Ragland out there sometimes with Mace on an option play, and when Ragland got it, it was kind of destroyed by the Penn State defense, which, of course, their defensive line is really strong. It's been a factory for defensive linemen over the past decade or so. So, the rushing attack, there was a whole 36 carries, 83 yards. I know that, some of that is kind of slanted. McQuaid had 2 carries for -7 yards. Maddox had 5 carries for 3 yards. But I thought at the top there with Abbott and Mace, they had a good performance against this Penn State defense.
I agree completely. And we said it on the broadcast with David Abbott, 10 carries, 53 yards. There's not much of a surprise now in terms of why he was potentially considering transferring to move up to the FBS, because he looked ready for the challenge against Penn State. And there were even some plays where he even missed some holes. Again, it's ludicrous to suggest that 53 yards, you're an FCS running back for Villanova against the number 2 team in the country. Rushing for 53 yards is a bad performance by any means, but it speaks to how talented this guy really is, and he's still so young. He already cracked 1,000 rushing yards as well, so big personal milestone for
in that game against Penn State with that 28-yard run.
Yeah, with the 28-yard run that almost set up the field goal that Villanova ended up not converting due to the penalty late in the first half. But regardless, Abbott looked really solid, super strong, just muscling off Penn State tacklers, and he's so good with acceleration. I think we talk about how important it is for running backs to be patient and wait for holes to develop, but there are also times where the holes open up pretty quickly, and you just got to take advantage of that. And you think with Penn State, for Villanova, if you open up a hole, it's probably going to close really quickly against how good that front 4 is for Penn State. So for a guy like Abbott, it would behoove you to have that acceleration ability so you can get through that hole as quick as possible, maximize the amount of yards you get. So I really thought Abbott in particular really stood out. And Isaiah Ragland too had some nice runs, just getting to the outside super quickly. Again, it was all about just making things happen super fast, because the longer it took a play to develop, the higher chance it would go poorly for Villanova, just because of how unmatched they were on both sides of the ball. So
I know that you were critical about the offensive line in the first game against Colgate, and I agree with most of that. But I thought they played better against Penn State. I know that Temi took the penalty, which hurt their momentum they built. And overall, Villanova had less penalties than Penn State, but they had more penalty yards. And I thought Villanova took those penalties at more costly times. And of course, when you're playing a team that you're overmatched against, it is difficult to kind of keep up, especially without taking some of those key penalties. But I thought the line did a much better job, held up well, and allowed Abbott to have some of those holes. And like you said, Steve, I mean, when he broke out the 28-yard run, I thought he was clear all the way to the end zone. It was a nice job by Penn State to catch up to him. I believe it was Collins who eventually got to him there to tackle him around the 20. But still, Abbott, I thought he played well. I thought the offensive line did a better job as well. And I think this was a good test for Villanova to get ready for Monmouth. Monmouth has played an easier schedule to this point than Villanova. Hopefully the Wildcats will be ready to go in their Week 3 game coming up. And I thought there was a lot of encouraging signs. Defensively, we talked about, the secondary, despite being young, was much better. Offensively, the rushing attack was where it needed to be. And also you had some of the younger guys step up, and Reed and Benkowski, who can definitely contribute, especially if Kenyon Miles does miss significant time, which it seems like he will at some point. So, I think having those different options at receiver is going to help. And I think kind of the main concern just coming off of this game is, just kind of keeping an eye on Pat McQuaid. If, like you said, Steve, if he is hurt in terms of his ability to run, we saw Watkins play through it last year, but he wasn't the same player. And of course, McQuaid is much more of a deep ball specialist. In addition to that, Connor was a much better runner than McQuaid is, but still having the ability to run for Pat really helped him against Colgate, and it would help him against a CAA as well if he could, have that ability to go to, especially if the passing game isn't working maybe as well as it was in Week 1. We'll take our first break on Villanova Sports Talk here on this Monday afternoon. When we come back, we'll talk about Villanova versus Monmouth. We also have some updates with both of the major FCS polls, which Steve and I will talk about. We'll also give you a run through the CAA schedule and our predictions of how the Wildcats will do through the rest of their conference games. We'll be right back here on WXVU, V89.1, The Roar. Welcome back on this beautiful Monday afternoon inside of the WXVU studio. 78 degrees outside. Feels like a kind of late summer, early fall day. Beautiful. Spent some of the morning outside, actually. Very nice, of course, here on campus. David Szczepanski alongside Stephen Cain on this Monday here on Villanova Sports Talk. Both feeling a little bit under the weather, but had a really nice first segment breaking down Villanova versus Penn State. A game that Villanova lost 52-6, but there were a lot of positives that Villanova could take away, in addition to the financial considerations that Villanova gets for traveling up to Happy Valley. Steve, before we talk about Villanova versus Monmouth, which you could argue is a bigger game than Villanova versus Penn State, especially for the Wildcats' playoff chances, which it is, I want to talk about where Villanova currently ranks in both of the major FCS polls. This came out about an hour ago. Villanova will remain number 11 in the Opta FCS Top 25 poll. The only CAA team above them is Rhode Island, who had a very low-scoring win on Saturday. They are ranked 7th according to the Opta FCS poll. With New Hampshire receiving votes, they are 25th, and the Monmouth Hawks, who Villanova will play this Saturday, ranked 21st. Again, that's in the Stats Perform poll. And the coaches poll, Villanova is ranked 12th, or tied for 12th, so technically moved down one spot. They are ranked 11th in both major polls heading into this game against Penn State this past Saturday. Steve, before we get into the conversation about the game against Monmouth, I want to talk about the CAA schedule coming up, because pretty much the rest of the way, except for the season ender against Sacred Heart, will be against CAA competition, as the Wildcats will have 8 games in conference play coming up. At Monmouth versus William & Mary, at New Hampshire, at Elon versus Hampton versus UAlbany, at Towson and versus Stony Brook. In those 8 games, Steve, what are your thoughts on that schedule? I know we talked about it briefly in our first episode this semester, kind of breaking things down on our Labor Day special. But Steve, also, what do you think the Wildcats' record will be in those 8 games?
Yeah, we talked about it. It's a very difficult way to open CAA play. I think that's something that needs to be taken into account here. Playing Monmouth, playing William & Mary, a team that has had good success in the CAA historically. But again, Villanova has that game at home. That'll make things a little easier. And then playing Elon on the road. Both Monmouth and Elon have both been very, very solid. And we've talked about it, how those 3 games are going to be so crucial. Because really then from there, you have Hampton at home. Hampton struggling once again. That'll be October 18th. And then UAlbany at home. Again, Villanova should have a clear talent advantage there. And then a bye week before what would be your final road game of the year against Towson. And at Towson, we talked about it, they could be a CAA dark horse, but it helps that Villanova has a bye heading into that. And then you play Stony Brook at home once again, which is huge for this team. And then you play Sacred Heart at home, a non-conference opponent. Hopefully a tune-up for the Cats as they potentially get ready for the FCS playoffs, but obviously we'll see. But it's really going to come down to these first few games, and we've been shouting it from the rooftops that like these next 3 weeks are huge for Villanova's chances, which is, again, crazy to say. You would think it would be the games in early November that really decide all this, but you almost think like Hampton, UAlbany, Stony Brook, Sacred Heart, as things stand right now, Villanova's head and shoulders above those teams, and they're playing at home. They should probably win those games. Towson, maybe a toss-up. That could be the one game that's interesting, but it's going to come down to, I think, how they handle themselves against Monmouth, William & Mary, and Elon.
I agree, Steve. The beginning of the CAA schedule is much more difficult than the ending part, and we talked about that in our first episode of the semester, which you can go back and listen to. But I think when you just kind of look at the schedule, Steve, they probably can only afford to lose one game if Villanova wants to make the playoffs, just with how the CAA is kind of put together this year. Rhode Island, really good. Monmouth, really good. Stony Brook, New Hampshire receiving votes. Steve, I'm actually more concerned about the game at New Hampshire on October the 4th than I am against Monmouth. I think the way that Villanova's defense is playing right now, I'm optimistic that Villanova can find a way to beat Monmouth, especially because Monmouth does not have the same rushing attack they had last year. We'll talk about it. They still have Rodney Nelson, but without Soniento, who was really the guy to pick up rushing touchdowns in big situations for Monmouth the last few years. Without him, I think their rushing attack got worse. Now, we'll see. It'll be a big test for the secondary once again. Villanova has to make their tackles, which is something they did not do last year against the Hawks in North Jersey. But I think at the end of the day, I'm worried about the game against New Hampshire, a team that still has been tough against Villanova over the years. In addition to that, it's on the road. You really don't know what kind of weather you're going to get early October in New Hampshire. Could be really hot, could be really cold, could be rainy. And then in addition to that, New Hampshire now receiving votes for the, I believe they received votes in the beginning part of the year, but now ranked 25th in one of the polls. So they're gaining some traction here. They played some much better football. And that's one of the games that I'm more concerned about. So I guess with the 8 games, I would say that maybe Villanova 6-2 at the end of it. If they have 3 losses as a whole, 1 to Penn State, would that get them in the playoffs? It should. Would it get them a home game? Probably not. They probably can realistically only afford to lose 1. But like you said, Steve, at the end of the schedule, Hampton has really struggled. UAlbany, you could make a kind of a, maybe a little bit of a hot take, but you could probably say that UAlbany could be the worst team in the CAA with the way they've started. North Carolina A&T with a big win yesterday, an upset victory. And then also Bryant able to win a game a couple weeks ago. So UAlbany right now really struggling. And then you have at Towson, which is a difficult game. Towson, I think we both said, is one of the teams that maybe has slept on a little bit. They lost to Maryland, but obviously Maryland, a tough program to beat. And then versus Stony Brook at the end of the year. Stony Brook is good, but Villanova handled it very easily last year on the road. So I don't have any concerns about that. I think by mid-November, which is when that game is on November the 15th, I think that Villanova will be at a much better point offensively and defensively than where they are now, especially as the season goes on. So I would say right now 6-2. The game against New Hampshire is tough. And then maybe the game against Monmouth or Elon is also a loss for Villanova. But I could very realistically see them going 7-1 in this stretch. Can they win all 8? It's possible, but I think the fact that you have 4 really tough games in the beginning is not ideal, especially with 3 of them being on the road, and you have to go on the road back-to-back weeks. You don't have a bye in there as well, so that's a lot of traveling for Villanova. So I'm probably going to say 6-2 in this 8-game stretch. Realistically, it could be 7-1. I think it's unlikely they sweep the board, go 8-0. I would love them to be. I just don't think that's where it's going to go, especially with the way the schedule's aligned.
I would agree with that, and the UNH game completely slipped my mind. I mean, I think we're both very afraid of that game, so maybe just wanted to block it out. But for Villanova, that yet another game in the first half of the CAA schedule that is going to challenge them. It's going to be very difficult. I would agree. I feel pretty good against Monmouth, weirdly. You think back to the game last year. It is strange,
isn't it? Because I feel like heading into the game last year, I think we both kind of sat. I think we did the show together last year before the Hawks. This is a tough game for Villanova. This year I feel much more confident, even though you could argue that Villanova is at kind of a shakier spot right now, especially if McQuaid is injured, which we don't really know. But I agree with you, Steve. It's some cautious optimism here.
Yeah, I just think the defense for Monmouth is just too much of an issue for them. I think Villanova offensively, even from what we saw from Tanner Maddox going up against a poor FCS defense, I think he could do some things even if McQuaid isn't in. And if McQuaid is in, even though he may not be 100%, I still trust him with his arm. I think that it's going to come down to the Villanova offense and how much they can make the the lack of quality on that defensive side of the ball for Monmouth pay. So
McQuaid being able to pass the ball alone may be enough to score 40 points on this Monmouth defense. We'll take a break here on Villanova Sports Talk, just hitting 12:30. When we come back, we'll talk Villanova versus Monmouth. We'll dive into the game, tell you about what has gone wrong with Monmouth's defense so far in the first 3 games. We'll talk about who Monmouth has played in the last 3 games as well. We'll see how Villanova can find a way to win in North Jersey. We'll take a break here on WXVU. You're listening to Villanova Sports Talk here on V891 The Roar. Welcome back into our WXVU studio on this Monday afternoon. David Szczepanski alongside Stephen Cain. Glad you could join us here for another edition of Villanova Sports Talk. Let's talk Villanova versus Monmouth, a big game coming up, the CAA opener on the road for the Cats on Saturday. Looking forward to it. We'll be there for WXVU covering the game. You can listen to the game. We'll talk about that much more as we end today's episode. Steve, want to talk about Villanova versus Monmouth. We'll start with Monmouth coming into this game with a record of 2-1. Defeating Colgate back in late August by a final score of 42-39. That was on the road in New York. Then losing to Hampton, beating Colgate 42-39, defeating Fordham 49-28 in early September on September the 6th, and then losing to Charlotte, their FBS opponent, by a final score of 42-35. That was a close game, of course, against an FBS team. Nowhere as good as Penn State is, but still, Charlotte, an FBS program. So Monmouth comes into this game with a record of 2-1. Their offense has scored at least 35 points in all 3 of their games that they've played in so far. They're averaging 42 points per game, and of course, they're led by Derek Robertson. There's so much to say about Derek Robertson. He had a program record of 6 passing touchdowns against Fordham in that game on September the 6th. This season, Steve, he's 100 for 138 with 5 interceptions, but 14 touchdowns. He's averaging 421 yards per game. Some guys end the season with 14 touchdowns. He has 14 touchdowns in 3 games. In his last game against Charlotte, again, an FBS opponent, he was 36 for 49 with 410 yards. Just want to roll down some of the awards that he was listed for this offseason. Stats Perform FCS Preseason Walter Payton Award Watch List, East-West Shrine Bowl 1000 Watch List member, FCS Football Central Preseason All-America First Team, Phil Steele, preseason All-America First Team. Phil Steele, preseason CAA Offensive Player of the Year. Phil Steele, preseason All-CAA First Team. Preseason CAA Offensive Player of the Year. Preseason All-CAA First Team. Stats Perform FCS Preseason All-America First Team. Difficult to get through that, especially with the way my voice is today on this Monday. But he's been nominated for pretty much every award that you can think of. He's on the first team. He is an excellent quarterback. He is the leader of this offense. Yes, he has some interceptions, but when you throw the ball 49 times a game, you're going to run into those interceptions now and then. I mean, it's just hard to get past his numbers. I know he said it last year when Villanova lost to Monmouth in that game at Kessler Stadium, but Robertson puts up video game numbers so easily. I mean, it's like he's playing Madden constantly every week.
I would agree with that. And what's so jarring with Derek Robertson is, I think, just the arm strength. We talk about Pat McQuaid, but he's somebody that is great at being accurate at all 3 levels of the field. Again, easier said than done. He's great getting the ball out quickly on screens and those short passes inside 5 yards. And then he's great at dotting up opposing defenses in the intermediate area of the field. And then, of course, he can hit you over the top with a devastating deep ball if you don't have any safeties back there to come and help. And if you leave some of these receivers one-on-one, just this Monmouth offense really does have an embarrassment of riches at the wide receiver position. You have Josh Derry, Gavin Nelson, TJ Spate, and then you even have Tron Neal, and Maxwell James as backups, but mainly Derry, Nelson, and Spate. Some of these stats, again, just through a couple games, are pretty jarring, right? Josh Derry, 17 catches, almost 250 receiving yards, about 15 yards a catch, 4 touchdowns. And if he were to keep up this pace, which is definitely a lot to ask, he'd be averaging about 123, 124 yards per game, which is just phenomenal. Really, really great stuff. And then Gavin Nelson would be on pace to average 120 yards per game throughout the season, 10 catches, 240 yards. TJ Spate, 12 catches, 141 yards, 12 yards per catch, 2 touchdowns. And he's their 3rd best wide receiver, and he's still putting up those numbers. So it's not even just Derek Robertson, but also just this high-octane receiving core that Robertson can throw the ball to.
And Monmouth's offense, in my opinion, is better than it was last year, and it was really good last year. It's the best offense in the CAA. Steve, I really like what you said about the wide receivers. There's so many weapons for Robertson to throw to. You know, Josh Derry, as you said, Steve, he's got 24 receptions this year for almost 400 yards. He had 917 yards last year, so he's on pace to crush that. He already has 6 touchdowns this year, just Derry. He only had 5 last year, so, that just goes to show you how good this offense is. And then in addition to that, Gavin Nelson, he already tied a career high in touchdowns in just 3 games with his 3 touchdowns. He also had 643 yards last year. He's got over 300 already in the first 3 games. So this wide receiver room is really, really talented. And, the running back room is definitely an area where, Villanova could take advantage of, similar to what we said about Colgate, just with their rushing attack, and Villanova did a good job there. But Rodney Nelson is still a really good threat in this Monmouth offense. He's probably, one of their top players. He was there last year, had a good season, now really taking over as that running back 1 after Sony Ento graduated. But Rodney Nelson, 57 carries this year for 326 net yards, and then he's averaging more than 5 yards, almost 6 yards per carry. He does have 2 touchdowns. He's averaging more than 108 yards per game. Now, some of that was because Monmouth had an excellent game against Fordham, 49-28. They, of course, put a lot of points up against Colgate, but the rushing attack is still, capable of putting up some yards, putting up some points, and it starts with Rodney Nelson, but also Elijah Jennings, who has 7 carries, 28 yards, had a touchdown. He's kind of their second back. He's a younger kind of running back, kind of working up the system. This is a good place for him to start because the offense is really, really good, and you have a guy like Rodney Nelson in front of you, so there's a lot of different weapons, a lot of guys to learn from. So Jennings is kind of that second back, but I definitely think the running back room is definitely their weakness of their offense. But I mean, to have Rodney Nelson as a weakness is pretty much a strength for their team because of how talented and how good he can be and how good he is. So this is, as Steve said, a really high-powered offense. It's the best in the CAA. It's capable of putting up a lot of points, and even though Villanova's defense is one of the best in the CAA, they played well against Penn State, especially in the first half this week. It's hard to think that Monmouth is not going to put up at least 30 points again just because of how good their offense is. They have so many weapons. It's impossible to stop when you have really 3 could be wide receiver 1s in your core. Then you have a really good running back. Have a pretty good offensive line to allow protection for Robertson. So that's really the keys to success for a really, really good offense.
Yeah, having that balance between the run and the pass is essential for an offense to go from good to great. A lot of offenses sometimes only are excellent in one of those 2 areas, and sometimes that can limit them because then defenses can focus on that strength, force them to go to their weakness. But if you have the passing game and the rushing game going, then the defense, it's very difficult for them to either decide to sell out and stop the run or play conservative and shut down the pass and make them run the ball, because again, Rodney Nelson is somebody that is only 5'8", but he's almost 200 pounds, so he's very quick, right? He's a shorter back, but he could also break tackles. So kind of like how there's balance between the run and the pass, there's also a balance with Rodney Nelson's speed, but also strength, right? And being somebody that'll be difficult for these Villanova guys to tackle. And then we were raving about Villanova's improved tackling against Penn State, but that'll be something to look for in particular with Rodney Nelson. And yeah, you mentioned it. I mean, he's gotten the lion's share of the carries. It's not a running back by committee situation over there at Monmouth. Elijah Jennings, the clear secondary back, and Nelson on almost 60 attempts, averaging almost 6 yards a carry. So he's certainly no fluke. And again, you mentioned he's on a torrid pace to finish the year in terms of yards per game.
Now, as good as Monmouth's offense is, as bad as their defense is, just to put it in perspective, Monmouth is averaging more than 12 yards per catch. Their defense is allowing more than 15 yards per catch. So their defense has really, really struggled. They're giving up at least 36 points per game on average in the first 3 games against Colgate, Fordham, and Charlotte. When you just kind of dig a little deeper into the numbers, as I said, yards per catch, 15.26. Yards per play is almost 7. And then when you look at the rushing attack, yards per run is almost 4. So this is a team that will give up a lot of points. They'll give up a lot of yards, when you put everything together. Also, time of possession, just when you look at them, the defense has been out there longer than the offense, and the offense is as high-powered as it is. We said averaging 42 points per game. So their defense really does struggle. We'll talk about some of the bright spots on their defense, and it really starts with Jaden Jones, who leads the team with 16 solo tackles, 27 tackles for a loss. And, this defense for Monmouth is very young, really at all parts of their defense, in the secondary, at the line as well. Jaden Jones is a defensive back. He's a sophomore, but he leads the way. He also has a tackle for loss, 2 yards in addition to those 27 total tackles. Also, Lamont Lester Jr., he has 3 sacks at second on the team with 14 total tackles. He's only a freshman defensive lineman. And also on the defensive line, you have Josiah Graham, who leads the team with 3.5 tackles. So their biggest strength of their defense is their defensive line. They will get some pressure on the quarterback, but really the concern is their secondary. They have a lot of younger guys similar to Villanova in the secondary, and they've just really struggled so far to get used to the college level, to get used to the CAA, and I don't think it will be any different when the Wildcats line up to face the Hawks this Saturday.
Yeah, and for Villanova, the passing game against Penn State, now again it was against Penn State, it did really struggle. So again, something to look out for as well. It was great against Colgate in the first game, and I guess that's kind of interesting to think about. Which defense would you take, Colgate's again or Monmouth's? I mean, I think Colgate's maybe a little bit better than Monmouth's at the moment, just because Monmouth has given up just a lot of points over these first few games. But it's something to look out for, and I think for this Villanova passing attack, you do have to be excited that there is a dip in competition. You played against Penn State, you played against A.J. Harris and Sakeet Wheatley back there for the Nittany Lions, and now you get to go up against a young, inexperienced secondary that Coella, Kopecky, these guys are much more experienced, running routes, creating separation. There's definitely opportunity for the Cats to take advantage of the Hawks on that front in particular.
This defense is really going to struggle, in my opinion, against Villanova. And if McQuaid is healthy, even 85%, I think Villanova should score a lot of points. I think what it really comes down to is, can Villanova's defense play better than it did last year against Monmouth and make some tackles? Find a way. It's going to be difficult to shut down Robertson, but find a way to at least take one of his main options away, especially if that could be Josh Derry. That could really help you in the end run. Obviously, easier said than done. When you look at the history between these two teams, wanted to bring that up. Of course, Monmouth did beat Villanova last year 40-33. We were on the call for that game as well, which was a lot of fun despite the loss for the Wildcats. That was a game last year where Robertson was 22 for 23, only missed one pass, 358 yards at 3 touchdowns. Rodney Nelson also had 83 yards over 10 carries, so he had an excellent game against Villanova last year. That was also with Sonny Ento, who picked up 2 touchdowns in that game against Villanova. But the main reason why I brought it up is Villanova, of course, with Monmouth being a new CAA opponent, they haven't played each other a whole lot, but Monmouth is 3-0. Villanova has yet to beat the Hawks. Steve and I think it's possible at happening. I think the Wildcats have a pretty good shot in this game, especially coming off against Penn State. I think that was a good test for them to get ready heading into this game this week, especially defensively, and hopefully they'll be ready to go. I think the main question is everybody healthy? Hopefully McQuaid is good to go on Saturday as well when the game starts. We'll take our final break here on Villanova Sports Talk. We come back, Stephen and I will give our thoughts to the poll questions, and we'll begin to wrap things up, and also, of course, highlight our WXVU coverage on Saturday. Don't want to miss it. Don't touch the dial. We'll be right back here on V891 The Roar. Welcome back to Villanova Sports Talk here on this Monday afternoon. Final segment, time for the poll questions. David Szczepanski alongside Stephen Cain. Again, we'll be back 1 week from today on Monday, September 22nd. And next week we'll have a special announcement, as we'll be having a special guest join us on September 29th. Again, we'll reveal that next week, 1 week from today, on Monday, September the 22nd, who that special guest will be. Steve, time for the poll questions in. Again, you can vote on my Twitter at WXVU David S. First poll question: which Villanova football player impressed you the most against Penn State? David Abbott, Brandon Binkowski, Newton Essiem, or Omari Bursey?
I got to give an honorable mention to Brandon Binkowski. We were talking about it a bunch driving back from Penn State. That's something that I'll never forget. Just a really great moment for Villanova to come away with points at the buzzer, final play of the game, 4th and goal, just super dramatic to prevent the shutout. But I think you have to go with David Abbott here. We talked about it, over 5 yards a carry against this Penn State rushing defense is otherworldly stuff from the sophomore.
I'm also going to go with David Abbott as well. I thought it was huge just to have his production get back to the level where it was a season ago. I think that's going to be huge, especially for the rest of the CAA schedule. Obviously, the game against Colgate was just kind of week 1, getting back into everything with the potential he has. I mean, really, the sky is super high for David Abbott. That's where I'm going to go as well. Do you want to guess where the numbers lied? Who do you think received the most votes?
I think we fall in the majority.
Binkowski is the decision from those listeners out there. 47% going with Binkowski, 40% for Abbott, 6% for both Essiem and Bursey. I agree with you, though, Steve. Honorable mention for Binkowski. It was a great catch. It was great for Villanova to get on the board. I think a lot of people in that 46%. I mean, in addition, because it was a great catch, Binkowski played really well in the fourth quarter.
Yeah.
Maybe people who bet on Villanova to cover for Binkowski there. But, I mean, like you said, Steve, he deserves a lot of credit. Honorable mention for sure. I'm going to go with Abbott because I think that really helps Villanova the most, especially heading into the rest of the season. Poll question number 2, did you go to Beaver Stadium for Nova Football versus Penn State? Yes or no? Steve, do you want to shockingly reveal it to everybody? You didn't go. We used your voice AI on the broadcast. We were there. I was just curious to see where kind of Nova Nation lied on this. 61.5% saying yes, 38.5% saying no. And we spent some time at the Nova Football Club and alumni tailgate. OSI, the Office of Student Involvement, was also there. I have an interview coming up later today with Matt Caesar, of course, so I'll talk about, we'll show that interview later today on my social media. Caesar, of course, member of the 2009 FCS National Championship team, also World Series champion, 2016 with the Cubs. Talk about, or I'll have that interview again later today. But that was such a great tailgate, such a great experience to be there. And any kind of thoughts from that experience, Steve? I mean, in addition to walking probably 4.5 miles in 85-degree weather with hundreds of pounds of equipment, maybe not hundreds, but still a good 50 pounds. What do you think, Steve?
I definitely felt, and I think you would agree with me, David. I think that, it was definitely difficult to walk with that equipment, and it was very hot, and we were in suits, and it was very exhausting in some ways, but I think just being at Happy Valley, the experience, it made it very worth it because you don't know if you're ever going to be back there calling a game at one of the best venues in all of sports in Beaver Stadium. And I think just seeing the Nova Football tent, that was a great experience, and a bunch of people just coming up, even though again tickets were $50-$60, manageable, but still you're paying a decent amount of money to go and see it if you're a Villanova student that went on the OSI bus or just went up on your own with some buddies, driving up Saturday morning. We
saw a lot of people at Sheets. That was the place to stop before we did the drive back to campus. A lot of people. It was nice.
Yeah, and but I think the student body, and good on them, they understood how important this was because this was the end of a 2-game arrangement between Villanova and Penn State. They signed a deal back in 2018 that they were going to play in 2021 and 2025. So now that deal is up. So there's a chance Villanova and Penn State don't play for a while. Saturday's contest was only the second time in the last 74 years that they've ever played each other, and hopefully that changes because I think it's good how it just emboldens different parts of the state, right? Villanova fans, they can go out. It's a manageable drive, and they get to see a great venue and a great campus, great college town. So
I agree. If you haven't been, like we said earlier, you have to cross it off your bucket list. And it was definitely hotter than we expected. I packed a sweatshirt, didn't need it. Didn't wear it. It was 85 degrees at game time. Some clouds came through in the second half. But still, a great experience to be there. Like you said, Steve, to see some people who, of course, drove up themselves, others who took the bus. There was probably about a little bit more than 500 alumni and staff there that attended the tailgate. That doesn't include the other people that we saw inside of the stadium, and probably even a little bit more than that. So very well represented. We saw a lot of those members of Nova Nation at Sheets, as I said earlier, after the game, making the long drive back, about 3.5 hours back to campus. Got home a little bit after midnight on Saturday, at least back to campus here at Villanova. Poll question number 3, who will win Saturday's CAA contest between Villanova and Monmouth?
I think Villanova. I think that they understand the importance of this game, getting off to a good start in your CAA opener on the road. I think they want revenge. They played a pretty good game against Monmouth. It was a great game between both teams back in mid-November. We were there for that, and it'll be a rematch at West Long Branch, New Jersey. And Villanova, they lost in a shootout. I think this time they're gonna come with a different type of energy. And I think the deciding factor again is just going to be this Monmouth defense. I don't know if it can hold up against this Villanova passing attack. And then on the other side of things, I think for Monmouth versus Villanova, I am encouraged by how the secondary performed, and I'm very curious to see how they'll do against Josh Derry, TJ Spate, and others. The guys we mentioned at the top of the show, like Anthony Hawkins, Demille Bostic, Jamie Tyson. Caleb Moody, and of course Samir Dawood kind of leading the pack there. We saw a lot of good things really from all those players. Again, kind of grasping at straws at certain spots, but still against Penn State, they were doing some good things, and I'm curious to see how that'll translate to guarding a high-level FCS offense.
Monmouth has so many options. Their offense is really good. We'll see how Villanova does against their defense. Again, I think a lot of it will come down to how healthy is Pat McQuaid. If Maddox has to come in, how well can he play? So a lot of different factors going into it. But I feel, as I said earlier, cautiously optimistic heading into this game. I think Villanova is in a pretty good spot, especially after, like we talked about, the way they played against Penn State. I'm optimistic about this game. I'm going to say Villanova defeats Monmouth. I think it'll be a close game. It's going to be a high-scoring game. We'll save our score predictions for the pregame show on Saturday, but I think it's going to be both teams over 30 points, which is what Monmouth has really been accustomed to. I'd be surprised if this game is 21-14 or anywhere in the 20s. I'd be very surprised, especially if the winning team is anywhere in the 20s. I'm going to go with Villanova as well. Steve, how many people, what is the percentage that you think voted for Villanova?
I'll say 75%.
87%. There's a lot of optimism out there. I don't know if it's that high in terms of chances that Villanova wins, but obviously a big game. And like I said, in the beginning, in the open of the show, it's a bigger game than it was against Penn State. The expectations were pretty low against Penn State just because of how good the Nittany Lions are. This game is much more important to Villanova's CAA chances. If you lose this game 52-6, then you're in big trouble. So Villanova, of course, big game. Monmouth is ranked. So is Villanova. It's going to be a great contest on Saturday. Again, you can listen to it for free right here on WXVU beginning at 12:30 p.m. with our Roar pregame show. Kickoff is at 1 p.m. Stephen and I will be on the call. Looking forward to it. Should be a really great afternoon to be back up there. We were there last year. It's a beautiful stadium, beautiful facility.
Nice.
It's a very similar size to Villanova Stadium, but it's really nice. It's not far from the beach, not far from the shore. It's still September, so maybe if you want to make it a day, make it a weekend, go to the beach a little bit afterwards. It's a great area to be, great environment, and it's going to be a fun time on Saturday. So again, you can listen to it for free right here on WXVU. If you're within a 6-mile radius of campus, you can listen on the terrestrial radio on 89.1 FM The Roar. And of course, you can always listen to us on our website, WXVU.org, and on the Radio FX app. Just search for Villanova University. Very simple, very easy. Thanks everybody for tuning in. Again, we'll be back next week, Monday, September 22nd, with our 4th edition of the semester. And again, next Monday, at the end of the program, in the second half of the show, I'll announce the special guest that will join us live on Monday, September 29th. We'll see you then, Nova Nation. This has been Villanova Sports Talk. Well, we'll see you on Saturday, hopefully, for Villanova versus Monmouth. Stay tuned to our social media as well for more at WXVU.sports on Instagram and at WXVU on Twitter. For Stephen Cain, I'm David Szczepanski. Have a great rest of your day, Nova Nation. This has been Villanova Sports Talk on WXVU. And as always, go Cats!